Hey guys, in this video, I'll be showing you how to utilize scdata website tool to make a global competition information system analysis to determine your dream job in the dream industry. So if you're a high school student, if you're a university student, undergraduate, master, you may find this tool really useful because it really helps you to identify which company you should strive for. Even though manufacturers are taking into account when you try to find a job, like the location, like the salary, but I believe this website does provide you with an analysis that is linked to these overarching factors. It's pretty comprehensive. So that's why today I'm going to show you how to use this tool. I'm not going to show you all the functions, but I'll give you an idea how to use it and provide search analysis. So after this video, no matter whether you have used this before or not, you should be able to grasp the techniques to utilize this tool effectively. Okay, so this is actually a part of supply chain analytics, but in general, any person who is finding a job should use this website. So I believe it is a really comprehensive tool. So if you do not know the website, you should enter scdata.ai, which then you'll reach a page like this. I already logged into my to my account, but if you haven't, you can sign up with any of your email address and a username. So I'm now in the page where I've signed in, and I'm going to go to my Workspace. And here you can see you can actually create a new project. So I've been having a lot of projects, so I'll create a new project with you to step by step show you how do you make a analysis. And I'll teach you the fundamental tools and elements that you need to take into account when you make this analysis. If you think I'm talking too fast, you can turn the speed down a little bit. So you should enter a title, let's say US job analysis, abstract, you can type some hello. Let's start right away, see how it goes. So you'll have a new page, you'll edit the page. After you're in, what you do is when you want to present the data, when you want to present graphs, you want to create a cover page. It's like an introduction, it works like a title. So which you can find it here under, maybe taking a little bit time to load. Yeah. So you have a new page. After you have a new page, you should click template where you can choose from a variety of pages. So in the title page will look like this, where you enter the name of the report. So for the sake of this video, let's call it as US job analysis. So we are doing pretty general report today, United States job analysis. And we're going to be focusing on year 2018, even though it's 2020 right now. But yeah, I'm not entering new data today, so I'm basically using the data provided in the website, existing data, secondary data. So it actually come from year 2018. Okay, so you enter your name, maybe your school, your company, blah blah blah. So that is your title page, just to make sure we have a nice and smooth presentation. And you have a new page now. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce you to the analysis tools. So analysis tools is pretty comprehensive. If you see, here's analysis tools. You have 3 categories. The first category is focused on geo-info, basically provides you with geographical information concerning enterprises, concerning employees, concerning your salaries, blah blah blah. So you can see there are 5 respective functions that you can use under this geographical analysis, where you can gather essential data and information. And today, you can definitely try on your own, but today I'm going to be focusing on enterprise distribution, which are basically helping you to find out how many companies under S&P 500, so Standard & Poor's 500, how many S&P 500 companies are located in each state in the USA. So click OK. We'll see a graph. Yeah, well, you won't be seeing anything yet on this page. You'll be selecting the industry. For me, if you are not focusing on any specific industry like finance or IT, you can just select all. So you display all these industries, which are, I believe, there are 11 of them. After that, the region, you don't have much. This website is mainly USA focused. So you have United States, and yeah, you don't have to care about this. Fiscal year 2018, and you will start analysis. Yeah, taken. Yeah, so if you take geography, I believe you know this kind of chloroplast maps that basically have different shadings relative to the indicators, which are basically in this case really discrete, continuous. I mean, really detailed numbers. So here you see a map of the United States. I believe it's straightforward. We're focusing on all the industries. So it can be clearly perceived and interpreted from this graph that most underemployed companies are located in California. Runner-up is New York, and yeah, Oklahoma, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon. Yeah, and you can also switch to total revenue to see it's again California. Remember, you are taking account of all these industries. Yeah, after that is New York and Texas. Okay, so you have many elements, 7 elements here you can play around, including inventory. But if you're finding a job or planning to find a job, I believe the most important elements that you should be concerned about are the number of enterprises and the total revenue. So here you are basically having 11 industries. So now I'm going to clear all and focus on the finance industry, which is what I'm interested in. And now I believe it's not California anymore, isn't it? Now it's going to be New York, and you can see the highest total number of revenues and enterprises are located in New York City. So here's our enterprise distribution. I don't want to spend any more time on this. I believe it is pretty straightforward, and you can close it if you do not want to leave it, but you can also save it as well. If you save it, it means it's going to be part of your overall presentation, which you can publish later into the website and get a shareable link for others to view. Okay. So that is about geographical distribution, GIS, Geographical Information System. Now I'm going to be focusing on analysis relatively to industry. So now you may have an idea about the location, but you still haven't discovered the industry in depth. So I'm going to be introducing you to wait a while. You need to create a new page, by the way. Otherwise, it's going to the page is going to stick to your graph right here. So by creating a new page, I can open analysis tools, and now we're moving on to industrial analysis, where you are going to find out which industry has highest growth rate, which industry has the highest revenue, profitability, and potential in the market. So I'll start with profit and revenue, cost versus revenue, which you can see here. Going to be okay. And you can see data here. Let's say we want to compare all the industries, selecting all, start analysis. Okay, here you are going to see this graph. You may be able to identify some of the companies right here, like Apple and Walmart. These are the company names of S&P 500. You can see Walmart has the highest cost and the highest revenue. So yeah, this is an essential graph for you to make comparisons on the revenue, which do provide you a lot of useful information, even though not directly by interpreting this graph, but you can do more thorough calculations afterwards. Okay. And the second graph I want to introduce to you is revenue, it's cost versus profit. Why is this important? Because if you know business, you may know that revenue it is important, but it does not take the cost into account. So you may have $2 million of revenue, but you may have 1.5 million cost for your warehouses, for variable cost, electricity, for your raw materials, for human resources, for your company infrastructures, for technology. So that's why it is important to also look at a graph of cost and profit, even though revenue do provide you useful information as well, such as the predictable potential of a business in the future. Okay, so here's cost versus profit, all concerning all the industry, but you can also see a particular industry, like if you're interested in information technology, you'll just be playing around with Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Apple, this kind of companies as well. Okay, I'll start. So Yeah, and now you can see multiple companies right here. Can be a little bit messy, and you can actually manipulate this to start with a single industry and make comparisons with the rest. Yeah, it's pretty convenient. I'll leave finance. Okay. Yeah, so now you can see finance. We got JP Morgan, Bank of America. We got Wells Fargo. We have Citigroup, well as Berkshire Hathaway. Yeah, and now we see a lot of companies right here. So we're able to analyze, particular industry, looking at the cost and revenue. You can see Berkshire Hathaway, which is led by Warren Buffett, has a really high cost, high spending, but relatively low revenue as well. Sorry, operating income, profit. If you don't know operating income, it's basically revenue less the cost and the variable cost as well. Okay, so like the raw materials, electricity, and so on and so forth. So now you can make comparison of a industry. So maybe you can choose a company that you believe can be your dream job, dream enterprise, and enterprise. You go compare with like healthcare. You can see healthcare relatively is weaker than the finance industry, spending more, earning less profit. Also, you can look at real estate, an interesting large volume investment in the market. You can see real estate do have, yeah, that's hard. Low spending, low cost, low profit as well. Also, if you do not know about consumer discretionary basically refers to the goods that consumer buy after they are able and sufficiently available, sufficiently capable to afford their necessity goods. For instance, an example of consumer discretionary can be Rolls Royce, can be a villa, can be a really expensive AirPod, can be iPhone as well. Basically, yeah, after you purchase your necessity goods. And consumer staples refers to the necessity goods such as milk, perishable vegetables, meat, your clothing, and maybe in many cases your housing as well. I believe your housing, yes. So let's compare consumer staple with consumer discretionary. Yeah, you can see consumer stable. I mean, it's really stable. Yeah, consumer discretionary, high revenues as well, but we're not sure why they're stable. So more investigation is required. Okay, so here is this your profit versus cost. You also can explore profit with total asset because even though you may know the profit, many businesses have debt risk, which means they are borrowing a lot amount of money. They have asset, a lot of investments. So you want to find out how much return is a company generating on the asset. Yeah. So asset can be warehouses, human can be human resources, just cash, raw materials, inventories. So basically, with this graph, you're able to identify the return on investment, which is a really useful indicator. Yeah. So here you can see the return on investment. You can see that, finance now does not seem so optimistic, isn't it? We see a lot of asset investment going on into the finance industry, but not generating as much profit, operating income as companies like Apple or Google, relatively. Yeah, so it is a good consideration. Doesn't mean the finance industry is bad. Finance is still one of the careers where you earn a lot of money, where you get rich. But it actually shows you the finance industry does have a large investment asset, and the return on asset is relatively slow. Like selling a bond, selling a shares, credit swaps, options, futures. Yeah, so really interesting graph for you to have a look. So it actually conveys information about the risk. For instance, if you go to the finance industry, you may be earning a lot of salaries, but your risk can be relatively high compared to information technology, where today there's a high consumer group, customer face, customer loyalty base, while you are spending not as much as finance, where you have to buy assets, merger and acquisition, you buy companies, private equity, you buy companies or delist a companies from the IPO, and you restructure the company again and sell it over. Highly risky, even though you may be millionaire by joining a finance firm to investment bank to do this kind of private equity, but it can be highly risky as a lot of asset purchase, asset investment involved. Okay, interesting graph. Okay, now that's pretty much about industry analysis. So by having these comparisons, you may be deciding on what industry do you want to join. But looking at revenue versus cost, profit, operating income versus cost, you're able to identify which companies do have a high potential, which companies do provide you with high salaries. Usually, the companies with high profits are relatively give you relatively higher salaries. That is indeed a trend, which you can be looking at, like finance, a lot of salaries, IT, a lot of salary, consumer discretionary, yes. Consumer staple really depends. Sales necessity goods, depending on your position, whether you are a clerk doesn't make a lot of money, a manager, franchiser does make a lot of money. So and by comparing cost versus asset, you can consider risk. And we'll be looking at risk here as well, where we make analysis focusing on individual companies, where you're going to make a final decision on which company are you going to put your resume into, which company are you going to investigate, going to try to get into for your internship or for your full-time or part-time job. So now we're going to do enterprise diagnosis. So from this step, let's say you should have an idea which industry do you want to go into, theoretically. And now we're going to be using two different elements. First element is our operating margin with revenue. How do we calculate operating margin? It's basically the net income, which is the income deducing taxation, variable cost, dividing by the revenue, which is expressed in percentage or decimal. 0.4 is 40%, 0.2 is 20%, and versus revenue. Let's have a look. So I'll be selecting all industries, doing analysis. Okay, interesting analysis. This looks pretty messy. We have now companies for all the industry, but let's say you're interested in IT. So because we already did industrial analysis on the last step, so now let's say you are interested in working for an IT firm. Yeah, now you can see the data here. So by intuition, large companies usually have a relatively lower operating margin because revenue is a denominator. But however, we want to look at these companies which have an operating margin that is high while also having high revenue. This does make a company more competitive in the market. And we can actually come up with a profit frontier based on these companies that have a high both elements, both having a high revenue and high profit margin, including Apple. We have also Google, we have Intel, Facebook, Micron Technology, MasterCard, and Versign and Visa. Okay. So we're interested in these companies that have a competitive advantage, which means they are generating high revenue. But for each dollar, operating margin is how much you generate from each dollar sale, deducing the variable cost, like the raw materials, electricity, human resources, blah blah blah, energy. And if a company both have a high revenue and high operating margin, which means it sells a lot, it has a high stream of income coming into the company, while the company also makes a high profit, also makes a high income on each dollar sale it makes. So you want to apply to companies like Facebook, Intel, Google, Apple, Versign, or MasterCard and Visa. But not these companies right here. These companies right here are not really competitive. These are relatively okay. They have a low revenue but generates high operating margin for each sale they make. But we also want a high total revenue, right? We want the company to sell a lot. For instance, a restaurant. McDonald's is definitely different from a local chicken restaurant where you only sell a few chickens a day. McDonald's sells a lot. Even though, but it's different in this case because all the companies we're looking at are Standard & Poor's 500 companies, S&P 500 companies. So here is operating margin relative to revenue. Lastly, we'll be looking at the risk. Once we know operating margin, once we know the profitability potential of a company, how much a company is generating, we want to have a look at return on asset versus liability asset ratio. So liability asset ratio, simply put, is basically total liability divided by the total asset, giving you a ratio. Return on asset is how much is basically calculated by your net income, net operating income, divided by the total asset to see how much return are you generating from your warehouses, from your machineries, from your inventories, how much are you generating from this asset, human resources, and cash flows as well. Let's have a look. Let's say we are doing the information technology, IT industry again. We only select IT. We want to start an analysis. And now we can see we have a bunch of companies right here. Many of them are sticking together. And our x-axis now is liabilities asset ratio, and our y-axis is return on asset. So let's look at this VeriSign right here. So VeriSign now has a high liabilities asset ratio, which means it borrows a lot of money, no matter it's bank loans, debentures, overdraft, it borrows a lot of money, and it also generates a high return. So this is relatively safe, but we want companies here. For instance, NVIDIA and Micron, again, Texas Instruments. These companies are borrowing less money, but they're generating a high profit based on the assets. So based on this graph, these companies are competitive, these companies are optimistic, these companies have a high potential. Yeah, so this is basically how do we interpret this graph. Okay, so that's it. Now I want to wrap up. Do we make decisions solely based on these graphs? Absolutely no. We may, yes, absolutely no. Like a company may borrow a lot of money, and like just now, you can also see Walmart on our first graph. Walmart has a high revenue but high cost. But does that mean you should not go to work in Walmart? No. A lot more investigation are required, such as you can do a Michael Porter's analysis as WOT. You can look at the revenue. Because sometimes a company's, how much money it borrows, a company's risk should not determine whether you should apply to a company or not 100%. Sometimes you may have a risk appetite. You want to apply to risky companies. They have a high chance to make a lot of profits, and then it means you are also getting a higher return. But I believe these analysis tools do provide a good idea for you to have a look at what companies, where to find your job, like New York City, California, Texas. That's the first step. Secondly, what industry has high potential in the market. And lastly, you want to find out what enterprises are relatively low in risk, what enterprises are generating high income. They do have the capability to generate income given relatively lower cost. So I believe this will help you to make many fundamental decisions on what job to apply. However, you should take more steps into account, combine these graphs, don't base your decision on one graph, because sometimes the company may be generating high revenue but have a high cost. Sometimes the company may be borrowing a lot of money, but it does have a high, high return on asset, may have a high growth potential. So, this is just to provide you with certain essential skills. If you want to perform an analysis presentation, remember to use a template page. You also have a page like this. I'll show you another page. You can also have a content page where you can make some notes, like a Google slide, and then you can actually share the link to display your information to more people and to help yourself. Okay, so that's about our tool session today, walking through how to use scdata to make decisions on identifying and finding the optimal job for you. Hope you find this video useful, and please complete and try out, play around with this website on your own time. Thank you for watching.